There are various scenarios which investigators are going to have to look at very closely to see just what went wrong. We're going to try and simulate the circumstances in which this plane landed. We're using Microsoft Flight Simulator X, perhaps the most sophisticated commercially available flight simulator, to recreate the final moments before this plane actually touched down. I'm going to simulate a scenario where the plane actually touches down very late. What you actually see on the screen before I start the simulation is the cockpit of a Boeing 737-800, exactly the same cockpit as the pilot would have had. The primary instruments that he would be looking at now, his airspeed and his altitude, that's this big display over here. He'd also very closely be monitoring his flap settings and his thrust. Now the thrust is what dictates engine power. So he'd be looking at that very closely. His hand would actually be on the thrust lever as he comes in for that final approach. Here's where I'm going to start out this simulation and do a scenario where he touches down late. So let's just see if I can play that up and try and recreate that particular scenario. Now there are various options which are available to a pilot if he misses his approach or he has an approach which is less than ideal. This is what the scenario would have been from the outside of the aircraft as he came in to land. Let's go back into the cockpit and see what we can do over here. Now I'm deliberately recreating a scenario where it's not necessarily a perfectly even line up to the runway, but over here I'm more or less even, but I'm still a bit high. Now in a situation like this I can try and force a landing, which I'm going to do now, or I can actually try and go around. So let's just try and force the landing. I'm already way past the ideal landing touchdown zone. I have touched down at this stage, but the runway is ending very, very quickly. My nose wheel has just about come in now, and in a scenario like this, if I am to activate my brakes and put in full wheel braking like that, it's just not good enough. I'm going to end up going off the runway. So that's a scenario which the pilot would have faced, and it was a scenario like this that resulted in the disaster. Now, what are the other options which are available for the pilot? Let's just try and play out one other option which he had, which would have been to do what's called a go-around. Let's now look at a scenario where the pilot might have felt that it's just not right for him to have actually tried to go ahead with that landing and perhaps considered what's called a go-around. He could have been too late, or he could have been perhaps unstable. So again, the pilot coming over the runway over here, but at this juncture he's actually quite high. So instead of forcing the aircraft down at this juncture, what he can do quite easily is just to pitch up a little bit, apply full power over there and fly away. That's an option which is available to the pilot in a situation like this, where he feels that he's just not in an ideal position to land the aircraft and fly away and do that again. And that's something that is actually done quite commonly around the world. If for some reason a pilot is not satisfied with something, he feels that his approach is not stable, or he feels that he's approaching too late, then he always has the option of going around. Modern jet aircraft have a great deal of power, and scenarios like this are not at all uncommon. So if the pilot at any juncture felt that he needed to go around, he could easily have decided that. There's a go-around button which he could employ. He could go to full power, and he could just do that approach again and try and land the aircraft when he felt that his approach was stable and that there was nothing wrong.
TUBA.com